It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. You can also listen to him on the Best Coast Boys podcast. Landon, we made it. It's draft week. How are you holding up, buddy?
I'm excited, man. I mean, all weekend, I had some family in town for the first time in a long time, which was great, just to kind of try to get back to a sense of normalcy with all this. But it was very distracting to know that we were under 7 days to the NFL draft, and I was trying to sneak away and do some more last-minute mock draft simulations and check out some guys. So, it's been an exciting ride, and we finally have made it right to the precipice of the draft, and I'm excited to kind of get there and see what we get.
Yeah, so for me, I print off. You can kind of see it. Dane Brugler's the beast right here. Sorry, trees. I apologize.
It's
pretty thick, but I went through like 2 or 3 different highlighters this weekend, just trying to find all this information. And actually, Landon, I discovered an interesting nugget about a player that we're going to talk about in our second segment. That we're hearing some whispers that the Cowboys could be interested in. So make sure you guys tune in for that. But first, we've got to start with some breaking Cowboys news. Right before we came on the air, it was announced that Sean Lee, the general, has announced his retirement. After playing 11 seasons in the NFL, he was a second-round pick in the 2010 draft. That was the same draft as Des Bryant, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
This isn't unexpected. We had a feeling it was probably coming. First and foremost, your thoughts on Lee's retirement.
I mean, we don't have a very long show, but I will say that, Sean Lee at different points in the last decade has been the consummate professional football player. I mean, just beyond that, I mean, the guy is football obsessed, like if this was anything else that he was directing this much attention to, he would probably be on a list somewhere. Because he is just, like fascinated with the sport, fascinated with how to get better. This is a guy that clearly, injuries are going to be a major part of the discussion when we talk about the legacy of his play. But I would much rather discuss, how incredible he was when he was on the field. There was a period of time when I'm pretty sure that he was probably one of the top 5 or 10 defenders in football. Easily. Yeah, I mean, he was at times when he was at his peak, he was as good as anybody playing linebacker. And I think that, you saw regularly for multiple seasons when he was able to be on the field, he had an effect on the defense that I don't know that I've ever seen rivaled, maybe outside of what Deion Sanders did for a defense, shutting down a side of the field. Normally I'm not a guy that likes to look at on-off splits, and I'm not necessarily going to quote any here, but Sean Lee, just by your own eyes, you could see the difference in the way this defense played over the years when Sean was on the field and when he wasn't on the field.
Well, I'll quote him because I believe from 2013 to 2017, it was like 7 or 8 points per game difference when he was on the field and wasn't.
Yeah. And again, like it shows too, like you see it, the team doesn't play as quick. They don't play as fast. They don't seem to be as well organized. Sean got everybody lined up, and then he also processed the information faster than anybody else. I think Sean gets a lot of credit for his mind, but he was also a very incredible athlete coming out of college. I think people forget that. Like, there was a reason he was a second-round pick. He was physically gifted as well as mentally gifted. Obviously injuries sort of sapped that over time. But the reason that a guy like Sean Lee can continue to play with all the injuries that he sustained and all the time that he played in the NFL field was because he was just smarter than everybody else, including coaches. And I love Sean Lee. I desperately hope that he is able to find a way to be a coach for the Cowboys, because I just think that the guy has so much knowledge, and so much love for the sport, and that's infectious. And I think when you have a guy like that on your team, whether it's a coach or a player, he inspires others to kind of know more about football and know more about not even just their side of the football, but the other side of the ball as well. And so I love Sean Lee on any way that you can, and I'm glad that he's getting a chance to kind of enjoy his retirement. I hope he does. And I wish him nothing but the best, because I absolutely loved watching him play football.
Yeah, so he didn't play a ton over the last 2 years, but that linebacker room is really going to miss him, right? Because he was the leader. He was the guy that was doing the scouting reports and watching the tape of the opponents. And I think it was in the All or Nothing, right? They showed him right after the season was over. He's still in the film room. Everybody else is leaving, going on vacations. He's watching film, getting ready for the next season. And they're going to miss him, and I'm going to miss him play, because I miss watching him play, because he was at his peak. It was special because there really wasn't anybody like him in the league, right? Where he just knew exactly where to be at the right time. And early on in his career, like when he was in his younger 20s, he had the athleticism to match that, the instincts, right? And that's where you saw, I believe it was the 2012 or 2013 seasons, he had like 4 interceptions in the first 5 games of the season. Just a special player, an even better person. And I think the Cowboys are really going to miss him. Really quickly, Landon, before we move on, this doesn't impact the draft or free agency or anything, right?
No, not really. I mean, I think, the idea was that even if Sean came back as a player, his role was going to be extremely limited. I think if anything, they would probably have found a role for him. They would have carved a role specifically
just
for
because
him.
It's him. Yep.
Just because it's him. So I can't imagine that there's like a hole to be filled necessarily. In fact, I would assume that they've done most of their offseason planning with the idea that he wasn't coming back. So I think if anything, they may have had to make some moves to get him on the team if he wanted to come back. I would assume that they spent the entire offseason with the default that he was not.
Awesome player. I don't think he's probably a Hall of Fame player, but would not shock me, Landon, if he ends up in the Ring of Honor someday, because he's that type of person, that type of player. And like you, I hope he sticks around with the Cowboys, whether that's as a coach or as a consultant. Sean Lee, awesome career. We've got 2 ad reads for you today, Landon. We're going to start with Nugenix. Cowboy fans, listen up. Nugenix, the #1 selling free testosterone booster at GNC, is offering a complimentary bottle to all football fans in America. All you have to do is text DRAFT to 231-231. This unique man-boosting formula is powered by Testofen, which helps boost free testosterone and total testosterone levels and increase energy and lean muscle mass. Plus, if you text right now, they'll include a bottle of Nugenix Thermo, the most powerful fat killer ever, with key ingredients to help you get back in shape. Absolutely free. Text DRAFT to 231-231. That's DRAFT to 231-231. Also want to tell you guys about BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Football might be over, but NBA, MLB, and NHL are in full swing. BetOnline even covers awards, TV shows, and reality TV with real-time updated odds and props on almost anything you can imagine. BetOnline has you covered for all the news, scores, and odds. It's the best way to place your bets, and it's free to sign up. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Landon, let's get into some Cowboys rumors. And I know we always have to be a little bit weary of stuff coming out, a couple days before the draft. But in terms of the Cowboys, a lot of things that we hear at this time of year end up being true. A couple years ago, we heard that the Cowboys coaches might prefer Taco Charlton over TJ Watt. That ended up being the case. We started to hear about Trevon Diggs being a legitimate option at 17. The Cowboys likely would have taken him there if CeeDee Lamb wasn't available. So we do hear these kind of rumors start to pick up. And one that I wanted to touch on today comes from our buddy Jeff Kavanaugh at 105.3 The Fan, talking about Elijah Molden, the defensive back from Washington, and that the Cowboys are doing some extensive research on Molden ahead of the draft. I tweeted out a stat the other day that he actually has just under 500 career special team snaps. We know the Cowboys are going to care about that. But what would your thoughts be on Elijah Molden to the Cowboys at pick number 44?
Well, I mean, I guess my first question is, what's the thought process here? Because clearly this guy doesn't necessarily match a lot of the, really any of the cornerback metrics that the quarterbacks that the Cowboys usually imply.
He's not an outside corner.
To corners.
Right?
He's not an outside corner at all. I mean, he's a limited athletically to a large degree. He's shorter. I think he. I could be wrong, but I think he scored under a 5 RAS relative athletic score. So, I mean, very
4.60 40-yard dash. The vertical, it was okay. It's just he didn't do any of the shuttles. He has a 29.5-inch arms. He's small.
He's 5'10", like he's under 5'10", under 200 pounds. Yeah, yep. Like he's small. So my thought process is, are we getting this guy with the idea that he's playing safety? Is this the idea that he's the new KZ, where he's a former slot corner who had a lot of production on the ball that teams just didn't know what to do with him, and then Quinn decided to put KZ to safety. He plays some slot as well. He's not as good at slot as he is a safety, I think the idea being that moving a slot corner to safety because of having familiarity inside, playing inside, and that's and kind of having the familiarity to see the football field from that angle.
Mm-hmm.
And they've had success there before. So is the idea that they're moving someone like him to safety to and also to play some slot, because we have guys who can play in the slot. It's not like we need to really draft a guy to play slot corner. I mean, I think if of the cornerback positions, slot is the one that's kind of covered, right? So it's interesting simply because, like I said, there's a history here with this coach, this defensive coordinator specifically, moving corners to safety. And the idea that this guy does not meet any of the thresholds that the Cowboys usually have for their outside corners.
I agree. He's certainly not an outside corner. He's probably not even a slot in the NFL, because I just don't think he necessarily has the quickness to keep up with your top slot corners or slot receivers. My guess is, Landon, they're looking at guys that could potentially play free safety that they don't have to draft in the first 2 picks, right?
Yeah.
So as you were talking, I pulled up the consensus board at The Athletic, and he actually comes in at 56. Now, typically when you're drafting, you want to select a player that's 10, 15 spots higher than what you pick. So if he's there at 75, and let's say the draft plays out where you go cornerback, offensive tackle, and hey, you need a safety. Okay, I think I can get behind Elijah Molden as a potentially a free safety at 75. At 44 seems too rich to me, because I think there's definitely some concerns about his size and his athleticism. 75, I think that's where I'm willing to gamble on him.
Yeah, and I think 44. I mean, there's just going to be too many good players that will like more than him there. So I could definitely see him as a guy that and maybe that's what this is, right? Maybe this is the Cowboys get whiff of the fact that he may fall a bit, and suddenly they think, okay, this guy could be an option at 75. Maybe we need to look at him, and maybe that's what this is, right?
Yes.
And so I think. And that would make sense. Again, like I think his play kind of dictates a round 2 sort of area, but when you factor in how undersized he is and how limiting that is, I wouldn't be surprised if he fell to 75 at all. So I think it's good that the Cowboys are doing due diligence here. If they take a corner and offensive tackle or defensive tackle at 44, they probably still need to double dip and go back into the defensive backfield at 75 or maybe at 99, depending on the way things shake out. And if you can't get Jamar Johnson or another guy that's similar to that, like that you like in the safety spot that could fall. I mean, I don't think Richie Grant's going to fall that far.
No,
I don't think Javon Holland's going to fall that far. So if you want a safety and you can't get Johnson, you may need to look and see what other options there may be. And if Elijah Molden, who, like I said, is probably a second round graded player based on tape, is falling to you at 75, that's certainly something that you should be taking a heavy look at, because that may be a guy that you can, end up putting at free safety and give you some really good snaps there.
It feels like a contingency plan, right? Like if we go up and get, let's say again, Patrick Surtain at 10, we go up and get an edge rusher like Azeez Ojulari, and hey, we still need a safety and we're picking at 75. Yep. Who are some guys that could do it and be at least suitable? And I think you mentioned Jamar Johnson. That's a really good one. And maybe Elijah Molden, if he's there, again, plays special teams, has position flex, incredibly smart. I believe he was named the team captain and the team's most inspirational player. So there's a lot to like. 75 is where I think it starts to make sense. I'm going to give you one more quick rumor. I just want your thoughts on really quickly. Brian Broaddus, it was, again, 105.3 The Fan, was saying if the Cowboys don't go Patrick Surtain or Jaycee Horn at 10 and they want to pick a defensive player, Micah Parsons is back in the conversation. Do you buy that?
Kind of, but not. I don't know. Not really. I don't know what would have changed in the last few days that made him come back into the conversation necessarily.
Well, and I can tell you, apparently scouts across the NFL are becoming more comfortable with the football character, right? I think the talent was never the issue. I think after teams got to do some Zooms and that kind of stuff, it sounds like, I believe this was from Dane Brugler on the Prospects to Pros podcast, was saying that Parsons kind of admitted that he was immature in high school and college and that he needs to grow up. And I think a lot of scouts and, people that are making decisions like to hear that. So maybe that's what's bringing him back into the conversation. Do you think it's likely they pick him at all? Like if you had to put a percentage on it, what would you say?
15%. Like I can't imagine
high on it. That just scares me. Like made my heart stop.
I was trying to be low.
I was hoping you were going to say like 1%. And I was like, okay, that's fine.
It's probably 10%. I mean, it's probably not very much at all. I just look. First of all, I just don't see there being a scenario where. I just really doubt that there's a scenario where the Cowboys are completely wiped out at quarterback at 10.
I would say I feel like it's very likely if they drop down to 15. And the corners are gone, right? That's where I can see Michael Parsons being in the conversation.
And that's
10 feels – I just have a hard time believing that Horn and Surtain are going to be off the board.
Yeah, I agree. So if they trade back and they're looking at 15, I think it certainly increases the chances. I mean, he certainly should be in the mix with whoever else they're considering if they trade back to 15. So, you and I don't love him specifically. And we don't really love him for, don't really love the flybacker at that spot at that high anyways. Yeah. I mean, for value. But I can see it. Like, I mean, he has incredible talent. He, in a league where linebackers don't make a ton of difference anymore. I think he has the ability to be a guy that could make a difference if things rolled right. Now, that's still quite a risk. Certainly not a risk that I'm comfortable with at 10. I feel more comfortable with it at 15, an extra pick. But I mean, look, he has an incredible amount of talent. He is an incredible athlete. There is a very, very good chance that he's going to be a much better pro player than he was a college player. I still have a hard time believing it if it's going to be at 10 for sure. And even at 15, I still think there's probably 4 or 5 other guys that I would prefer. I don't know if the Cowboys feel the same way.
Are you saying that linebackers don't matter? If that's the case, I might need a new cup.
Nope. I think linebackers matter, but I think it's a lot like running backs, Marcus, where I think for the most part they don't. You can find a running back that will do the job for you. You don't need an elite running back. Sure. You don't need an elite linebacker. But when you have one, you have an advantage because that's that's something that other teams don't have and don't always know how to match up with. So and I think that's the problem is that teams are chasing that advantage that rarely shows up.
LBsDon'tMatter.com. Best $10 I ever spent. Let's take one more quick break so I can tell you guys about Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar out there. It's hard to even explain it. It's real chocolate with amazing flavors and a great combination of low calories, high protein, and low sugar with no crazy additives. Best of all, they taste fantastic. In my mailbox right now, I just got the alert that the coconut brownie chunk is in there. I cannot wait for the show to end so I can go out and grab one. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKEDON and get 15% off your next order. Again, that is BuiltBar.com. All right, Landon, Mock Draft Monday, and we've got an interesting one here from the Draft Network. They have the Cowboys taking Patrick Surtain, again, at number 10. But Trevor Sikkema, one of a good friend of the show, actually mentions that he would not be surprised if Jaycee Horn is the selection over Surtain. So as we're getting down to the last couple of days, what's your feeling here? Because I think as we get closer, I am starting to lean that I think I think Horn is going to be the pick over Surtain. How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's happening is that we're starting to hear some of the biases come out of the Cowboys camp, and I think that as we start to kind of put dots together about relationships and things like, for example, Mike McCarthy was the offensive coordinator in New Orleans when Joe Horn was the wide receiver there. So McCarthy and Joe Horn have quite a relationship. So McCarthy has known Jaycee Horn since he was 10 years old, essentially. So there's some combinations there that as well. There's also the Will Muschamp connection with completely blanking on my name, with the defensive coordinator Dan Quinn when they were both at Florida. So obviously Muschamp being the defensive coordinator at South Carolina, they're going to again know a ton about Horn. So we already kind of knew whatever connections there were to Surtain, obviously with Trayvon Diggs and that sort of thing, and obviously the Cowboys have a lot of connections to the Alabama program. I think what we're finding out now is that those connections they have to Horn, put him in play just as much as Surtain, and maybe if they have these tags touching, maybe they do feel a little bit more comfortable with Horn because they're a little bit more familiar with him because of these relationships. So, and it also sounds like Al Harris, their cornerback coach, has a pretty good relationship with Joe Horn. They played in the league together a long time, and I think they've just kind of known about JC for a long time. So it seems like, I mean, we know how much relationships drive the draft, and I think especially
that's
this year.
Out of these two guys. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Especially this year. I mean, any kind of extra knowledge you can get for these guys is super valuable. So absolutely. I think they may default to that. I think that is something that we should keep in mind. Absolutely.
All right. So I want your decision right now on a Monday. If both players are available, who do you think the Cowboys pick?
I think honestly right now, I mean, just I don't want to be the guy that's going against my own talk, but I think right now I would pick Horn just because it does seem like there's a lot of smoke there. I mean, it makes sense. The smoke makes sense. Sometimes when you get this stuff and you hear it, it doesn't make sense, but you're so excited to hear news. You're just like, this actually makes sense. If you break it down, these guys are probably touching tags on a lot of people's boards anyways. And so the relationship aspect may be the kind of final bit. And here's another aspect too. Al Harris definitely is more of a playing style match with Jaycee.
100%. That's exactly where I was going to go. Yes.
He's definitely going to be a guy that is going to be able to help Jaycee kind of develop away from being so grabby, or at least being a little more subtle with being more grabby. And I think that that's something to keep in mind. And that's something that the Cowboys may think that they have an advantage there on other teams is, okay, we got a guy who knows exactly how to coach this type of cornerback. And when you eliminate that kind of extra worry about Jaycee Horn and you add in the fact that they've got a relationship there, I think it would not be very difficult for the Cowboys to talk themselves into preferring Horn over Surtain.
Yeah, so I have Surtain graded higher. I believe I have Surtain as the 7th best player in this draft and Horn 12. So I think there's a gap. But what I keep coming back to, Landon, is a lot of time these coaches, especially defensive coaches, they want players that kind of mimic their personality, right?
Yeah.
Bill Belichick wants very smart, under control type of players. I think he would prefer Patrick Surtain if he was drafting here at 10. Dan Quinn, his history of being in Seattle with Richard Sherman and these really aggressive and, Desmond Trufant, even with the Atlanta Falcons, I think a very similar player to Jaycee Horn. I think they just play with a different edge to them. And I think Dan Quinn wants guys like that. I even think about AJ Terrell last year. I think he played with a little bit of that same edge. So I like you. I kind of think we're trending in a direction where if Horn is available at 10, that's probably the pick. And frankly, I would love it. Again, I know I have Surtain higher, but I feel like Dallas needs this type of player, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, my grade between Surtain and Horn is, we say tags touching. You can say what you want. 6-1, half dozen the other. Honestly, sure. I would defer to what they prefer, because ultimately I feel like they're close enough players that if Dallas feels strongly about one of them, I'm on board with what they feel. Like I want to be. I could understand why they would pick one that they prefer, and that's not like one is so much better than the other that I'm going to argue the point. If they feel strongly about one over the other, that to me is another indication that I should probably like them because I think that they understand their system and understand who's going to fit best. So, I agree that I think that if the Cowboys feel more strongly about Horn, which is, I've assumed that they probably just would feel equally about the two. But if they feel more strongly about Horn, then that makes me feel more confident about Horn. Just because I think, like I said, my eyes don't tell me that there's a huge difference here. So I'm definitely willing to defer to what the Cowboys, with their extra amount of information, see as putting Horn over the top of Surtain.
Just a shout out to our sponsor really quickly. Before we came on the show, I looked at Bet Online's lines for where Jaycee Horn will go, and the over/under is currently 10.5, which I think is absolutely fascinating. A couple of days
These guys
ago,
are good.
A couple of days ago it was at 12.5. A week ago it was at 15.5. I think we might be getting an idea where the Cowboys are going in the first round. That is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, you can download and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audacity, wherever you get your podcasts. Please follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Cowboys. Continue to subscribe. Hit that like button on YouTube. You can follow Landon at McCool BCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher.